Hello and welcome to Scene 3 of Brand Film Live, where you can get exclusive insights on crafting branded content from experts in storytelling and marketing. I'm your host, Alexis Wierenga, producer for the Brand Film Workshop, brought to you by PR Week and Campaign US. Joining me today is Erin Heyns, head of Observatory NY, who is an expert in developing entertainment strategy, original content, and full 360 campaigns. I got that from your LinkedIn profile.
That's correct, yeah.
How are you, Erin?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Also excited to announce Erin is one of our jurors for the 2020 Brand Film Awards, which is coming up on May 7th.
Yeah, excited to see what comes in, who's doing exciting stuff, what's new, sort of who's pushing it.
Yeah, submissions are still kind of coming in as we speak right now. So do you have any potential advice or, if somebody's putting together a submission, what's the best way to just wow you as a juror with your submission or make the case for your brand film?
Totally. I always love to see what goes around the film, the support, the launch ideas, how that was brought to life. And then also just the creativity and the leaps that a client took or the leaps that an agency or a production partner were able to sort of help that client achieve. It's sort of what I'm looking for, kind of something a bit risky, exciting. And then again, like if there's anything about how well it did or sort of results driven, I would love to see that sort of work.
It's great to hear. So take notes if you're, putting together a submission for this year or next year, anything. To think about what our judges might be looking for when they're watching it. So, continuing on, you can check out brandfilmlive.com if you're interested in submitting, if you have questions on that, or if you're interested in buying tickets to our awards or workshop, which Erin has also been a part of in the past as a speaker.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such a wonderful collection of everybody from the entire spectrum. So would highly recommend.
Thank you. I wasn't going to ask you.
I'm definitely endorsing it.
Yeah, I didn't want you to force you, but thank you for doing that. Definitely trying to, get people there. But I'm excited for it too. It's a great mix of, creative and everywhere, but creative from agency and creative from filmmaking and people who kind of come together to make brand film happen on all levels. So today's focus for this podcast, is the marketing of brand film and an evolved ecosystem and how to, connect successfully with your intended audience. So Erin, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the brand film area?
Yeah, so I've been working in this space for about 5 or 6 years now. Started off at CAA. So a very deep entertainment background. I did the trainee program sort of out in LA and got to know everybody from film and TV and music and comedy agents, packaging agents, which are no longer really, but sort of just the entire entertainment ecosystem, and then sort of seeing the power of what happens when those come together for brands. So started under Jay Goodman, who has been doing this for about 14 years, started at CA. We've now split and are an agency called Observatory. And I've had the absolute pleasure of making incredible work for clients that is non-interruptive at the core of it. And brand film is sort of one aspect of making work that is engaging and doesn't interrupt at the very onset of it. And so within that sort of context, we've been able to do work for great clients, lots of film work, lots of experiential work that comes out of it, or games, or even a podcast. So that's kind of my background, yeah.
Any particular project stand out to you based on what you achieved or just personal pride?
Sure, yeah. I mean, they're a bunch, I must be honest. I feel very lucky to have been able to work on the stuff that I've done. From an agency side, I think some of the things that we really love is the work that we did with Mars and sort of the VCA, the Veterinary Association, which was something that launched last year with Refinery. So sort of a way into sort of brand film and exploring working with talent differently. So we had Whitney Cummings direct sort of these 3 shorts. It was the first time that VCA, the biggest veterinary organization, kind of went out and did brand work, and it was really successful for them. So as an agency, we love that model. There was a bidding war about who was going to get the content. It was very exciting. We worked with Whitney in a new way, and so we loved that. One of the ones that I worked on that I really loved was Corona in Mexico. We did a short animated film sort of exploring the 100-year history around what makes that beer the absolute finest. And again, just working with wonderful partners in London and Mexico, an orchestra, just like beautiful elements, an extremely high craft and love, and everything that went into that project was put through the lens of, have we made the finest selection? Because Mas Fina is sort of what is on the Corona bottle, and so that was sort of how we approached everything we did with that project. We've done a couple music videos, one for Budweiser with Kehlani that was awesome and unexpected and a huge release, and sort of leveraging up-and-coming star power with great creative work that just exploded basically all over the world. It was huge. So just a few a couple of the ones that I really loved. Yeah,
it sounds like you're very well versed in the different areas and all the things that come into brand film. A couple things. Yeah. And so I said to be reminded too that music is a part of it, like
Absolutely,
huge part of it.
A huge part of it. And I mean, we're currently working on something right now for one of our clients, and just seeing the response from the music industry and the response from the production community around coming together to make something that is musically driven, film driven, is incredible. They're as hungry as we are to see sort of this evolution and this change in how brands interact with culture.
Mm-hmm. So what does I guess you listed some recent examples, but in today, like what are you focusing on today in brand film? Or I guess what is it, have you seen, is today what you're doing different than what you were doing 14 years ago?
Sure, yeah. Maybe not for Jay, but for me, yes. So sort of the things that we're seeing now is that there is more sort of, people are more curious about it. People are a little bit more open to talking about what it means to develop film versus, I guess no one really ever came to us for a 30-second TV ad because even though we do those as secondary to whatever sort of the core piece of work would be. But yeah, we're seeing, the evolution is there, right? People are buying it more often. We're seeing a little bit more interest in it. We're seeing interest in how entertainment actually gets made, a different way of participating instead of just buying media to interrupt something that people have chosen to watch. We're actually seeing people or brands invest in making content that people are choosing to watch. And we've even had success where advertisements were bought on top of our film pieces. So we were like on a YouTube channel, we had a Budweiser spot up, and there was paid advertising bumpers on either side of it, but it was to watch a brand piece of content. And I think that's sort of like an amazing pinnacle to reach, even just for like sort of 3-minute content where you're seeing people are choosing to watch it instead.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that people are enjoying it for the sake of just the content of it.
Exactly, and we're living in a content environment, right? Everything that we do is content driven, content based. We create it, we absorb it, we watch it. We're constantly looking for something new, and so to be part of that sort of evolving ecosystem and to have had an eye on that evolving ecosystem from an entertainment and brand perspective has been wonderful.
And that, leads in great to my next question. The idea, do brands have to change the way they advertise? With content there's so much great content out there. Do brands have to think differently about the way they're advertising or engaging with their audience?
Yeah. I mean, I would say absolutely yes. Like, we do need to change. No one's been doing the same thing forever and, hasn't evolved, right? So I think, firstly, obviously, yes, we have to evolve. Why? Because people have evolved. We're not doing the same thing that we used to be doing. We kind of have changed the way we consume everything. Music, film, sports, TV. There's nothing that was consumed as we consume it now, even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, different streaming rights, different players. And so I think we have to obviously adapt to the sort of non-interruptive model. Obviously, there are still places where you can reach people through interruptive media or advertisements, but it's less effective because it's not really what they want to be doing, and we have every choice in the world to be doing exactly what we want to be doing right now. And so brands really need to come along with that story, and that doesn't mean that you have to make stuff that isn't relevant to your brand or something that feels off tone. People love brands for very specific reasons. I think there's a moment to sort of unearth those reasons why people love your brand, and then to work around those as you start bringing better stories, better experiences, and better content to them.
So thinking about the idea of, creating in new ways and some of that looking like filmmaking or, documentaries, game series. Is that right for every brand, or are we thinking too simply about brand film with that kind of question?
I think it's really interesting. I think there are a couple things, and I was talking with a few colleagues before we came in here just to kind of catch up with them. But I think it's not about not only making a huge piece of film or a 2-hour documentary, or it's only successful if you've landed it on a Hulu or a Netflix, right? Like, I think that those are great lofty goals. But I think that we are also in sort of like sub-infancy. We're not totally brand new at it, but it's still an evolving space. But I do think that old models of advertising need to adapt to making anything that is not interruptive at its core. So, and again, that could be whatever is entertaining. That could be something on a platform or working with partners on TikTok or influencers, etc., that is not 100% interruptive. And it could be all the way on the other side of making a brand film or doing a documentary or creating a TV series in partnership with someone or not. There are all these various ways to adjust the way that we're doing advertising. But the most important thing for brands is to adjust and to be less reliant on their media by 100% to reach people and sort of start bringing people into their ecosystem and their stories.
So thinking about a smaller brand in that area who maybe, or someone starting out, they have a smaller budget. What advice do you have for them in creating this kind of interactive content and actually getting in front of their audience? Like, what kind of value do they have to capitalize on?
I mean, we are seeing such a wonderful explosion of entrepreneurship, and we have so many choices now about where we're even buying our toilet paper, like everything, right? There's a choice for everything now.
Yeah.
Like, one that we didn't really have all that much, not even that long ago. It just didn't exist, and now there really is everything to make the decision about sort of how you're being transparent with your audience. And those are where the smaller brands are definitely winning, this like direct authenticity. They can tell their own story. It's their truth. A lot of them are obviously founder-led, which is, again, like this wonderful, rich territory for brands like that to explore. I just think that there's a lot of sort of, don't be expecting to be batting at the same level as like a P&G if you are a tiny D2C like deodorant company. Like, that's not realistic, but there is value in developing your own audience, and to do that, it's because we live in this sort of content world. It is the development of stories, telling those authenticity, telling those through channels that your audience is in. So your Instagrams and your socials, and perhaps it's a blog, and perhaps it's a really well-crafted newsletter, or different ways that, or podcast, or different ways that you're able to reach those audiences. But you need to kind of invest in your audience, keep telling them about your brand, your values, your truths. It doesn't have to be about product only. I think small brands win by developing audiences that love them, and that love is sort of, you can't really buy that. That's built by trust and sort of transparency, and that's kind of how I think small brands win.
Do you think a small brand can make something that could be considered a brand film? I mean, I guess
Absolutely,
that comes more into the idea of what is brand film, and that's something we debate internally as well, of like, is there a time limit? Does the product only have to be mentioned like X number of times?
Yeah, and I think that is the ultimate how long is a piece of string question. Because brand film and I hear you on that, because we go through this the same all the time, right? Like, it's kind of I think that there are really good examples of like scrappy, not scrappy, like scrappy doesn't mean like messy, but if people are truly telling sort of, if you have a founder that you love and you follow and they're telling a brand story, that is a form of entertainment because you followed it. Or they are speaking at different sort of events or podcasts, or they're putting out thought leadership pieces. That's still content and you're still engaging with it. But I think in terms of a brand film itself, there are ways for smaller brands to do that. You could do that in partnership with like-minded brands. You could do that sort of in partnership with a bigger brand. You could be a secondary brand if you want to make a big branded film, There are also ways to do that with an iPhone, and like there are smart producers and creators out there that are able to do that work, and we've seen it. It's beautiful, Like, I feel like there's some brands, sort of like the Adidas model, where they are very much like run and gun on the ground, making sort of exciting content driven, or like they've got this kind of group of creators that are working in tandem with them, where we're seeing great brand film come out of. But I don't think it is only a money play.
Yeah, or even, editor of Campaign US, Lindsay Stein, was saying in our first podcast that, there's a potential that, something you shoot on your iPhone could be considered a brand film.
100%.
The quality, not necessarily everything you shoot on your iPhone.
Not everything should be a brand film.
But there's potential there. You can't.
There is. I mean, I think that we're seeing, obviously, there's like incredible editing software, and we're seeing like more influencers and sort of YouTube creators only using an iPhone or a GoPro and creating really high quality video, or like video assets. And I think that I don't think it is about production value. I think it's about telling an authentic story, and you can do that through any medium as long as it's interesting and people are engaged and you're not just plugging a product. That's probably how I would think about brand film.
Gotcha. So, then thinking about, the story of it and the heart of it, do you ever, when working with clients, do you ever have to resist pressure from turning a brand film into an oversized television commercial?
Sure.
Like where just the product is like do you have to be like, you might want to pull back on how much you're talking about your product or think bigger about it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really fair question. I think that goes a lot to how an idea has been bought, how an idea is being launched, the understanding of sort of setting an expectation up front with a client that like, we know that there are elements of a paid media plan we need to fill, and normally those elements will kind of follow like the best social media guidelines because we're doing a lot of paid buys behind them. That's like brand in the first couple seconds. That's a 15-second piece that you would likely pull out of a longer film. But the same way that like when a huge TV or when a huge movie gets made, a studio also advertises it in a 30-second format on a paid media spot, right? Like you're still driving to the bigger piece. And so we need to kind of set that up. The reason that we're doing this is to drive people to the long piece, like a longer form piece. These shorter bits or these more like advertisingly focused will drive us there, and those will come out of the edit. But we do need to kind of set up that there are different purposes for each piece of content and make sure that they fit into an ecosystem collectively. Like you can't just make something and think it's going to live all by itself, because that doesn't happen. It needs support. It needs people to engage with it. We want to drive conversation. We want to think about a smart way to launch things. And so, when we're working with a client, we really spend a lot of time in thinking about how it's going to get distributed, what that amplification plan looks like, the same way you would do for any sort of launch of like even an album. Like there are people at labels that sit there and think like, what is the coolest way that we're going to get this out there? Same thing at studios, same thing at any of the streaming services. That's why we're seeing such exciting work come out of those places, and like really interesting partnerships and unexpected ways into surprising customers. That's sort of the same mentality that you want to have when you're working in brand film. But you have to set it up. You have to be ready for the ride. Nothing is 100% worked out when you start. That's just not how it is. Pieces click into play, and like an artist will sign on, or a different producer, or you get like great talent that'll be an EP, and that changes as you evolve with the project. But there needs to be space for evolution and creativity and like that spark to take place.
So with like leaving room for that evolution and creativity, are there like any, when you first meet, those like initial key questions that you ask that's like, before we think about anything else or like start talking about it, we need to know this from you?
So starting point with clients, I guess firstly, are they ready to do something different? That's the first question. And surely, and like by the time that we're sitting with them, they would have come in and know that there will be something different, So first step, are you ready to do something different? Yes, great. Secondly, have you bought your media? Because if there's an existing locked media plan, that means that the idea, like we will not be 100% idea-led, will be media-led, which also, again, for our creative team and sort of our strategists, that shifts the way that we ideate, that shifts the way that, like, what we would put on a table. Obviously timing is very important, understanding that different sort of forms of entertainment take different lengths of time to make. Like unscripted versus scripted is a whole different process. Film versus like TV or sort of streaming is a different, podcast is different, game is different. So understanding sort of the immediacy or the timing of something that needs to come out is a big part of getting engaged and starting to ideate around the work. Yeah, I think those are kind of the biggest questions. And then obviously, what is the goal, right? Like, what are we trying to achieve? Are we looking for a big awareness play? Because that's great. If we're looking for sort of a brand love and sort of affinity, that's also amazing. If you're looking for 100% sales metrics, that comes further down the funnel, right? Like, we need to invest in our upper funnel marketing and our new upper funnel marketing, which is bringing people in who will love and sort of be around the brand, and then getting them through the funnel at a later stage. But first investing in sort of finding our audience and our people.
So when it is something that is, it's something you consider a brand film, thinking about those goals, do you think there's a need to develop other forms of measurement than just, the standard ROI? Then, like you're saying, It's going to come, if you're looking from the sales perspective, it's not going to necessarily be your immediate result.
Yeah, I think, we've been stuck in the same sort of measurement tools for a really long time. The thing about like this huge increase in performance marketing and D2C is that you can now follow, and you are following everybody's behavior online. You know exactly what touch points likely led them to make that click through into add to cart, what made them abandon cart, we have that information readily available and in abundance, right? Like, there's so much of that information that it's kind of hard to even structure it into something that we can totally use all the time. But that doesn't work without an upper funnel, without an awareness, without brand love, without bringing people into the brand world. And so, there isn't sort of this idea of like share of culture or share of heart. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like, they're obviously brands that people love, and they love them because they've been doing things that are authentically that brand and pushing the envelope for hundreds, or not even hundreds, but like whatever, a couple like decades, but a lot of them are not. So yeah, I'm not sure.
yeah, it's like your brand might be mentioned a lot, but do people respect it? Are they loyal to it? Or are they like mentioning it as like, don't be like
positive
them?
or negative conversation? Like, obviously conversation is great, and like, are you bringing out the trolls because they're wrong and they haven't like evolved, or are you bringing out the trolls because you did something terrible and you should never have done that,
Right.
But yeah, there are different, the measurement side of things is kind of tricky, and there are obviously companies that are finding ways to do that. You can have someone literally watch, if you're doing placement and integration, they will watch TV and count the number of times you've been placed. Great. You can probably equate that to sort of some sort of media value further down the line by how many seconds you spent and what the exact viewership of the show is, and therefore your value is X. And that's great, that's a very tactical way to sort of get there, but it doesn't really measure. It doesn't really measure what the true impact of it is, like what the sort of return will be 6 or 8 months down the line.
So what does support around a film look like then? If you're doing, a bigger branded piece, is it the same as any other entertainment property? Do you think about it differently?
Yeah, I think, again, this comes back to the goal, right? Like, I think if we're trying to drive people to watch something longer form so that they can understand deeper brand values, then the goal is to get people to watch the film. Therefore, the way that we release that film would likely be similar to the way an entertainment property behaves, because the goal of those launch plans and those amplification plans are to get people to watch the long content, right? And that might be screenings and like music releases and viewing parties, and there are a variety of tactics around that could be employed. The ecosystem and the launch ecosystem is really important, and again, there's kind of there are different ways that you can make a brand film or like brand entertainment, and that specifically would give you a different type of amplification and launch plan. So sort of looking at, if you're going to partner with someone like a refinery or a Vice, like that comes with a whole media package and all these other sort of partnerships that can be pulled in, versus if you're going into the entertainment landscape by yourself, and you're creating something from scratch, and you're going to kind of develop it, and then you're going to take it to market, and you're actually going to go and visit like the studio heads and try and sell the project and then get them to come in and help on production. Then you would be co-working with them on a distribution plan and a launch plan. And then sort of the last side of that is if you are 100% fully financing and fully paying for distribution, which is the most expensive way to do anything, then it's sort of, then you are again relying on your own paid media, which that's just so expensive. You know, you can't develop, produce, distribute, then pay to promote it. Then, you know, that's what would make something cost prohibitive. But if you're making something that is truly entertainment, and people want to watch it, then you shouldn't really be living in that space.
Is there, you know, thinking about companies investing in those kind of concepts maybe, or giving creatives, is there ever a need to convince a company to give creative space to work in filmmaking?
Yeah, absolutely. There is. I think what we're all used to as brand marketers or sort of people who work in advertising or sort of like brand content is that we're used to being the final voice in the room and like making decisions based on what works with paid advertising, right? And I think we need to always come back to that moment on a set or in kind of a pre-production meeting to say that will happen. We need to obviously acknowledge, yes, like that you need to hear your client. You need to know that like your creative team is listening to that feedback. You need to know that that will be solved at some point. It doesn't mean that like on set when the bottle isn't facing exactly the right way and that doesn't matter truly, you know, like, but it might feel like that's the end of the world.
Yeah.
So there is sort of like, there's a very fine balance between those two things. Obviously, product is what we're here to sell. Like we are in the marketing business. This is the marketing tool and direction and sort of progression from where the advertising agents or industry has sort of been, but we do have to take into consideration that there is a client, obviously, and we are making a piece of brand film, and it's not a I don't know, it's not like the one piece that's super dark and you're never going to want to show anybody it because it's like really dark and twisted and tortured, you know?
Yeah.
Unless you're working for like a Kleenex brand. But so sort of that, you know, I think there's just like this definitely, and again, that goes with like preparing a client ahead of time, working with partners that you know and trust, having sort of, having your creative team recognize that there are things that will need to be addressed. So it's a balance, you know, it's just like, it's about having a good relationship at the very beginning.
Yeah. And, you know, thinking about that balance the other way of, you know, not having, you know, people on set who are so like gonna walk away because of creative differences because they don't want to incorporate
you
the brand.
Definitely, that's it. I mean, you have to be really careful about who you work with, you know? And I think what we're seeing, and it's really exciting, is that like amazing production partners that are like entertainment production partners or even like directors, you know, are more and more available in the space because brands are willing to go further. But yeah, you can't have like the most number one diva that will just be like, I'm out. Because
I don't believe my character would pick up this product at this time.
Exactly. There's definitely a balance. Again, it all comes back to like knowing that it's brand film.
Yeah, exactly.
We're here for with a client, you know, at the very core of it. But that doesn't mean that the work has to be terrible by any means. It can be incredible.
Yeah. Kind of having flexibility on all those sides.
Totally. Being very flexible, yes.
All right. So this will be, you know, final question. You know, there are so many new and exciting, you know, forms of advertising, you know, coming out of traditional advertising with brand film or activating audiences in new ways and investing in those areas. But why do you think so many brands might still be resistant to the type of investment that come with these like bigger stories?
Yeah, I think part of it is still the measurement tools. I think the more it's kind of difficult, and I know that Steve touched on this in sort of your last podcast with him, but it's definitely about the fact that like we have to get through procurement and we have to get through CFOs and like there's sort of these like, and when every dollar counts because everybody's budget is shrinking, that is where the hesitation comes in. You know, there's also this sort of, it's partly that some organizations haven't fully understood what the value of something like this could do for them. And so they understand that like buying an ad and doing this equals this nice result, you know? And I think part of it is like as an industry, all sort of upskilling and like being able to have those conversations confidently with those departments, so that you could, and this will come when measurement also evolves, right? We could say these are sort of, we know that this will be valuable for us maybe 6 to 8 months down the line, and we'd like to invest in something like this the same way that we would have invested in a TV ad that like was big for maybe not Super Bowl, but like the Oscars or like a big tentpole moment. And so sort of finding the way to bring those partners along with us as marketing and advertising evolves is really important. And then at the same time, knowing that your lower funnel and your cross-marketing capabilities need to be really tight. You know, that's what gets people out through the funnel down the other end, sort of have made a purchase. But without bringing them in and without creating love and sort of trust and affinity for a brand, they've got 100 other brands to choose from. Why not, you know?
Yeah, thinking about the broad parts, but also like what are they clicking on?
Exactly. Like what is that last piece that like really hooks me into making a purchase, and that all comes from the same place and the same brand and the same sort of brand world is really important. But we do have to kind of develop that entire funnel. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Any final thoughts on brand film that you want to throw out there about the awards or just the topic in general?
Yeah, I'm excited to see everything. I loved being with you guys a couple years back. I think it was just as the Nike Breaking 2 came out, and so we had a really wonderful debate and discussion around that. But yeah, just excited, truly excited about the space. I love that clients are ready and doing things, and we're seeing more and more of it, and we're seeing better expressions of it, and we're seeing interesting partners come to the table. And that's why I love my job. I think I just love my job because there is no current 100% blueprint for how you do this. We're evolving, we're working with different industries and different players, and the work itself is so much stronger. And so I think that's sort of what I'd love to see this year.
Yeah, we're definitely excited to, once the submissions are in, to kind of take a look through and think about, the big conversations that we're going to be having this year.
I love that. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. Want to wrap it up by telling everyone, head to brandfilmlive.com where you can check out, past winners, how to submit, get your tickets for the workshop and the awards so you can be a part of these conversations yourself. Yeah. And, so please check out Brand Film Live. Thank you again, Erin.
Of course, thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to Brand Film Live.